The country with the largest population is India. At the time of this video being made, the country just beat China with a couple million people, as they have roughly 1.43 billion people living there. The Vatican City is the country with the smallest population, which isn't even over 1,000 people. The Vatican is also the smallest country when it comes to land area, with less than a square kilometer of land, while Russia is the largest by far, with 16.4 million square kilometers, almost double the size of Canada. However, Canada has the largest coastline in the world, and it's not even close. Combining Canada's mainland coast as well as the coast of the offshore islands, their coastline is over 200,000 kilometers. The youngest country on Earth, however, does not have any coastline at all. And I'm not talking about the actual country here, but its population. Nigeria has the lowest median age on Earth with just 14.8 years, while the far more senior country of Monaco has the highest with 55.4 years. An interesting fact here is that Niger also has the highest birth rate out of any country, with 56.86 births per 1,000 population, while Monaco has the lowest with 6.6 births per 1,000 population. Probably not a coincidence. Nigeria also has the highest total fertility rate with 6.73 children born per woman in the country. To explain, that means on average each woman in Nigeria gets almost 7 children. The country with the lowest fertility rate is Taiwan, where 1.09 children are born per woman. But although Nigeria has the highest birth rate and fertility rate, it's not the country with the highest growth rate of population. That title goes to Syria, with 6.39% increase in population, while Puerto Rico has the lowest growth rate with a negative 1.29%. So why does Syria have the highest growth rate in population? Well, we find that answer when we look at the statistics of net migration. Here Syria is at the very top with 45.78 migrants per 1,000 population. To simplify, this means a lot of people are moving to Syria, and therefore bumping that growth rate up. The country with the lowest net migration rate is the Federated States of Micronesia, with a negative 20.92 migrants per 1,000 population. Now, this country shouldn't be confused with the region of Micronesia, just putting that out there. Now with some darker statistics. Lithuania is the country with the highest death rate in the world, with 15.17 deaths per 1,000 population, while Qatar is the place where the fewest people die. More specifically, they have 1.42 deaths per 1,000 population. And when looking at the very sad number of infant mortality rates, Afghanistan has the highest number of deaths with 103 per 1,000 live births. Slovenia is at the very bottom of this list with 1.51 deaths per 1,000 live births. For the maternal mortality rate, South Sudan has the highest number of deaths with 1,223 deaths per 100,000 live births, while Belarus seems to handle this best with only 1 death per 100,000 live births. Now, let's leave the dark statistics of deaths behind us and instead look at the life expectancy at birth. Where do you think people live the longest on average? I give you 5 seconds to write your answer in the comments. Perhaps you heard of the so-called blue zones, where people consistently reach an age of 100 years. These places are very specific regions and not entire countries. So if you guessed Italy, Japan or Greece, you're wrong. Monaco is the country with the highest life expectancy at birth, and with its 89.64 years, they beat Singapore by roughly 3 years. And the difference between Monaco and the very bottom of this list is a disturbing 35 years. Afghanistan holds this place where the life expectancy at birth is only 54.05 years. When we look at obesity in the adult population, Nauru sticks out with 61% of the population being obese. However, it should be mentioned that the first 10 countries on this list are island nations with a smaller population. When we look at the 11th place, we find Kuwait with 37.9% of the population being obese. And at 12th place is the United States with 36.2% of the population. The least obese country is Vietnam, with only 2.1% of the population being seen as obese. The same goes when we look at tobacco usage. Nauru is in first place with 48.5% of the people using tobacco. But with a population of roughly just 10,000 people, it gets more interesting looking at number 2 on this list, which is Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. They have a population of roughly 58 million people, and almost half of them use tobacco, 44.1% to be exact. The exact opposite seems to be Ghana, as they're at the very bottom of these statistics, with only 3.5% of the population using tobacco. Now for another thing that people like to use, alcohol, and the statistics of alcohol consumption per capita. Here, Belarus is on top of the list with 14.4 liters of pure alcohol being consumed per person per year. To put that in perspective, that's about 120 bottles of wine per year, or 2.3 bottles a week. Belarus' neighbor Lithuania comes in second place with 12.9 liters per person. At the bottom of this list, we find a bunch of countries, which is Saudi Arabia, Mauritania, Bangladesh, Somalia and Kuwait. All of them are at 0 liters per person. For education expenditures, meaning how much of a country's GDP is spent on education, Bolivia is in the lead with 9.8% of their GDP spent on education costs, while Somalia is last with 0.3% spent. Now let's look at some economic numbers. Here in Singapore, we find the highest real GDP per capita in the world with $157,000, while the country of South Sudan has the lowest with just $516. Now for the country with the highest GDP growth rate, we need to go to South America and the country of Guyana. In 2015, a large oil reserve was discovered in the country, and the growth rate has been enormous since it was a very poor country before this. In 2022, the country had a massive 57% growth rate. On the other side of the list, we find Ukraine with a negative 35% growth rate. For GDP by PPP, or purchasing power parity, China is on top with $33 trillion, while Tuvalu has the smallest basket of goods with a total of $60 million. Now let's look at another basket of goods and the statistics of inflation rate for average consumer prices. And in 2023, no country has had worse inflation than Venezuela, which is up 400%, more than double the second place country Zimbabwe, which has 172% inflation rate. The African country Burkina Faso is at the bottom of the list with 1.5% inflation rate. Liberia has the highest revenue from forest resources with 16.5% of the country's GDP coming from this source. And Mongolia is at the top when looking at the revenue from coal, as 8.62% of their GDP is from that source. Another sector is agriculture, where Sierra Leone has 57.44% of its GDP coming from just that, while Singapore has the lowest percentage of GDP coming from agriculture with just 0.02%. For industry, Libya has the highest percentage of its GDP associated with this sector, with 80.3%. Sudan is on the lower side of industry with just 4.8% of its GDP coming from just that. Sudan is also the lowest when looking at the service sector, as they have 6.4% of the GDP coming from services, while in the Bahamas, the service sector is a major part of their GDP with 79.3% coming from that sector. Now when looking at the labor force, no one is even close to China. With over 791 million people being able to work, they are kind of dwarfing the runner-up India, which has roughly 476 million people able to work. At the bottom of the list, it's no surprise we find a country with a small population, so the island nation Tonga has a labor force of roughly 37,000 people. So now we know how many people are able to work. Let's look at how many of them actually have a job. The highest unemployment rate in the world is in South Africa, with 29.8% of the people being unemployed, something that is causing major problems in the nation, which we covered in this video. The country with the lowest unemployment rate is Qatar, with just 0.1% of the people being without a job. Now let's specify even more and look at the unemployment rates between the ages 15 to 24, the so-called youth unemployment rate. Here Djibouti is at the top with a massive 77.2% of the youngsters being jobless. But Djibouti has a population of roughly 1 million people, so for the second place South Africa, which has a population of roughly 60 million and a 51.2% youth unemployment rate, it feels even worse. Qatar is at the bottom of this list as well, or actually at the top if you look at it from the perspective that unemployment is bad, with just 0.3% of the young people going without a job. People with jobs pay taxes, and taxes are usually an important part of a country's GDP. For some countries it's a bigger part, and for others a smaller. In Somalia, taxes represent 0% of the country's GDP, while in Denmark, which is leading these statistics, it's actually 46.3% of the country's total GDP. In fact, you'll find every Nordic country, except Iceland, on the top 10 list of tax to GDP. China has the highest current account balance with roughly $317 billion. while the United States has the smallest with a negative $846 billion. China also leads the pack when looking at exports with a value of $3.7 trillion, and the island nation Nauru is at the bottom with just $84 million in exports. So Nauru doesn't export a lot of things, but apparently they don't import much either, as they last in this list as well, with a value of $174 million. The country with the highest value of imports is the United States, with over $4.4 trillion. The US is also the country with the highest external debt of all countries with roughly $20.2 trillion. Now, who do you think has the biggest reserve of foreign exchange and gold? If you guessed China, you'd be correct. China has a value of $3.4 trillion saved up in other countries' currencies, while Burundi has the smallest reserve with a value of $163 million. Now, let's get ready for some more China domination. First up is the amount of installed electricity generating capacity. China has almost doubled the capacity of the runner-up, with 2.2 billion kilowatts. The United States come in second with roughly 1.1 billion kilowatts. And in last place, we find Kiribati, with just 11,000 kilowatts. But I guess it's good China has that much capacity installed, since they're also the country that consumes the most electricity. 6.9 trillion kilowatts per year, which is also double that of the United States. Timor-Leste uses the least electricity with 103 million kilowatts. Now, with all that power generated and also consumed by China, it gets interesting watching the statistics of how much electricity is lost in a country. Basically, this measures the generated output and then how much of that output is actually paid for. If there's missing power, that means that the generated electricity is lost on the way from where it's made to where it's being delivered. And here, China is at the very top as well, with 333 billion kilowatts being lost, while Nauru has 0 kilowatts transmission and distribution losses. Canada is the country that exports the most electricity, with 67.2 billion kilowatts, and the United States is the country that imports the most, with 61.4 billion kilowatts. The US is also the country that produces the most refined petroleum products, with a crazy number of 20.3 million barrels per day. And with that production, it's not crazy to see them at the top of exports of these products, as they export roughly 5.2 million barrels a day. And the country that imports the most of these products is Singapore, with 2.34 million barrels per day. Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kuwait, and Trinidad Tobago all tie for last place with 0 barrels imported per day. When it comes to carbon dioxide emissions, no one is close to China, as the country spits out 10.7 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide. Kiribati does it best with just 70,000 metric tons. Now, here's a fun stat for you: the energy consumption per capita. Here we find Qatar at the top with 723 million BTU per person. This statistic measures the total amount of consumed energy in a country and divides it with the country's population. The least energy consumed per person we see in Nauru, Micronesia, and Tuvalu, all at less than 1 BTU per person. The highest number of fixed telephone lines is in China, with a gigantic 180.7 million of them, while Guinea has 0 as a reference. China also has the highest number of mobile cellular telephone subscribers, 1.7 billion of them. Samoa is on the bottom of the list with just 2,250. China also has the highest number of internet users with 1 billion people, and also the highest number of fixed subscriptions for broadband with 483 million, while in Timor-Leste there's 75 of them. Looking at the military, Ukraine has the highest percentage of its GDP going to military expenditures with 33.5% of its GDP, while Haiti just spends 0.07% of its GDP on the same thing. When it comes to infrastructure, the United States likes to build things. They have the longest amount of roadways in the world with 6.59 million kilometers. They also have the longest railway network with 293.6 thousand kilometers. And they have the most airports of any country with 13,513 of them. The shortest amount of roadways in the world is in Tuvalu with just 8 kilometers of road. Liechtenstein has about the same length on their railways, making them last on the list with its 9 kilometers. In Barbados, Tuvalu, Brunei, Malta, Gambia, and Nauru, they have just 1 airport. Russia has the longest combined waterways with 102,000 kilometers, while Greece just has 6 kilometers. And the country with the many islands, Indonesia, has the highest number of merchant marine, with just above 11,000 ships carrying goods. Austria, Laos, Timor-Leste, and Hungary all have one ship each and combine for last place. Now go learn even more about countries of the world by clicking on one of the videos on your screen right now.